Welcome back to another fantastic chapter of the War-Song of Davokar. This time we focus solely on the party of the Queenseekers, who, last we left off, have gotten themselves stuck in an underground speakeasy surrounded by elite Ambrians, wondering how they're going to get out of this mess. Here's how. As Bijan and Melchizedek sit down to play a game of Stack Rock with the curious individual, Blasco Kilvar, Svanhild glowers from the corner. She doesn't trust any Ambrian. She's ready to kill everybody in this room, and we flash back to 14 years ago to see why. We see Svanhild taking up her initiation rite as a warrior of her clan, Sarkhan, escorting the mammoth war pig on a trade mission to Clan Veraco when a mysterious Ambrian accosts the group and offers to buy their mammoth for a huge sum of treasure. Svanhild and her Sarkhan compatriots say no, and then barbarian mercenaries are called upon by the Ambrian to attack. Svanhild is the only survivor. Her 3 companions all slain, and the mammoth, a symbolic ancient spirit of their tribe, is slain. This and many other atrocities faced by the barbarians, by the Ambrians, is why Svanhild cannot forgive the queen. That is why they fight. Bijan and Melchizedek compose themselves well in their games of Stack Rock, and Melchizedek uses his gambler's acumen to realize that Blasco, while losing, has been playing them, using the game pieces to send signals to his Ambrian companions that they are about to lock this place down and capture the barbarians inside. Melchizedek doesn't wait for further invitation. He immediately uses his mind tricks to confuse one of the Ambrians, and as all of the Ambrians jump up to fight, the Queenseekers are ready. Within a few short minutes, all of the Ambrians are dead, but Bijan has been stricken with a powerful poison. Melchizedek looks around for any of his medicus tricks, and he finds the leeching pot given to him by the barbarian clans as part of the equipment to take on the queen. And these are not helpful healing leeches. This is a biological weapon that is now released into the room. Svanhild, Bijan, and Melchizedek all get away, but Xena is left behind as the leeches begin draining her strength away. The heroes rush in to grab their companion and bring her back, and as Svanhild tracks down the last survivor of the room, the unarmed bartender, slays her, she finds a healing chamber occupied by a lone pacifist priest. The pacifist priest invites Xena into the room to be healed. Her strength, her vigor is brought back to her, but at the cost of becoming earthbound. She will no longer take on corruption, but any magic that affects her will now be in the form of physical wounds. This will interact poorly with her rune tattoos. But we'll see where that goes as the Queenseekers look on to their goal, the final chamber, which they now have the appropriate 2 keystones for. They are only 1 room away from finding the queen and taking her on. And so Svanhild got a lot of backstory this episode. We understand more that she is not just a raging psychopath, but that she has some very rational reasons for hating the Ambrians. Melchizedek is further playing up his role with his mind mage powers. He's far from the leader of the group, but more and more he is becoming the controller with his mind powers, his map reading, and his subtle manipulation of the NPCs. Up until now, Xena has been the mentally and physically stalwart tank of the group, but tonight with the leeches, she kind of hit a breaking point, and that's going to be an interesting direction for her character as we lead into the final challenge. And then there's Bajan. Bajan, who was missing for a portion of our adventure, Bajan, who has been the comic relief guy of the party, and yet there's something else going on with Bajan that is going to take one more session to really fully explain. So at this point, the Queenseekers have successfully infiltrated Indaros, made their way through the Underpalace, and they're about to face on Queen Corinthia herself. Before we get to that next session, let's look behind the screen to talk about a few of the tricks that I used in this session and why they may have worked so well even though they were extremely risky. The first risk I took was with the flashback sequence. Up until now, I've given players warning when their character is going to have a flashback so we can talk about it ahead of time and really flesh out what's about to happen before we see the scene unfold. It's also possible to not play out the flashback at all. It can be done with narration from myself or from the players themselves. But what I did here was surprise the player and everyone else. I asked for everyone's character sheets. I handed Svanhild's player back her sheet and said, "You are Svanhild 14 years ago. You are the same but with no abilities." And I handed the other three players sort of Sarkon randos who they embodied for about an hour of the 3-hour session. We got to fully see the Ambrian Queen Spy come up and make the offer. We role-played it out. All of this goes back to kind of an idea of show, don't tell. And while I advise some caution on using standard literary advice with your role-playing sessions, because remember, making a good role-playing game session is not the same as writing a good chapter in a novel, this needed to be shown. We needed to see not only what it meant to Svanhild to hate the Ambrians, but an example for all of these barbarians, all of these clansfolk, for what was being done to them. And the way I chose to portray this was by going back to an element that I heard a Symbaroum developer comment on in an interview, that it's kind of like, the system is kind of like a combination of Game of Thrones and Princess Mononoke. I've done a lot with the Game of Thrones portion of that, not so much with the Princess Mononoke part. So I created a profound and majestic animal companion and then killed them horribly. Now, did this work? Was it worth the time and the risk to show this scene? I think so. I was prepared to run one round of combat, but when the characters were having so much fun and were so engaged in what was going on, and there was actually a chance that the mammoth could be saved, I played it out one more turn just so they could kind of experience more of that pain through these characters. The second risk I took was with the game of Stack Rock and playing it out literally. Now, in a game, especially something like D&D, where your character might have proficiencies in Dragon Chess or 3 Dragon Ante, you're not meant to actually play out 3 Dragon Ante, although Wizards of the Coast is happy to sell you the official 3 Dragon Ante set, so you can do just that. The standard play is that you are making a proficiency check with maybe your intelligence or charisma modifier to show that, yes, after 3 rolls, your character wins the game and you move on. I wanted to play it out literally using Santorini, a game that is really easy to explain but has some interesting challenge to it. I was able to use the god metaphors, the building, ambition, and humility of the game to put in some not-so-subtle world building about the history of Symbar. We explained that Stack Rock was an ancient game with many variations, and you just happened to be playing the classical Ambrian variation tonight. So when you're doing a gimmick like this, I think it's important to ask, is the payoff greater than the distraction? And I think this time the payoff was good. Melchizedek got to show off his characterization. Bijan and Melchizedek got to play up their teamwork. And while this was going on, I reminded Xena and Svanhild's players that they're sitting back, not stuck in this game, so they were interacting with different NPCs as the tension was building. It made for an incredible scene that only took up about 30 minutes of the session, so I'd say this worked out well too. The last risk I took of the night is more of a risk to myself and my prep as the game master. I made some shortcuts on making this map. I didn't draw it out fully, but I still put a lot of time and energy into something that I knew would only get half explored, and that's about where we are right now. The players have gotten the required keys to move on, and while one player mentioned that they're kind of a completionist and they would love to see more rooms, they were outvoted by the other three that said, we need to get going, more rooms is going to be more resources spent, and we don't know what the rewards are going to be from those rooms, so it's going to be best to complete the dungeon. And that's fine. Am I a little sad that they don't get to see some of the cool things that were in the other rooms? Yeah, but I tempered my expectations at the start of this by drawing out 6 main rooms and knowing that only 3 or 4 of them had to be gone through in order to make it through the dungeon. And if I would have required them to go through every room in the dungeon, at that point it's just completion for completion's sake, and it distracts from the main story you're trying to tell. So I would ask yourself that question as a DM. Am I just putting out more rooms, more combat encounters to create more content, basically? Or am I putting out interesting options which my players can then latch onto or reject as they choose so that they can make the adventure something they like? But that's all for now. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about some risks that you might be considering taking in your own games. And next time, we'll be touching base with B Team, our raiders, to see how not only their battle, but the overall war is going, and go back to the Queenseekers to complete the dungeon and maybe, possibly, find the Queen. Until then, have a nat one day. Bye-bye.